The debris field did not care about deadlines. It sat between the iron gate and its next waypoint like a pile of broken teeth, rocks, frozen gas, dead satellite shells drifting in slow circles. Reed Calloway had run this corridor 17 times. He knew every shortcut, every gap, every place where the field thinned enough to push speed without losing the ship's hull plating. It saved 3 days off the delivery schedule, and 3 days meant the difference between a profit and a late penalty that would eat into next month's fuel costs. Petra Solano sat at the navigation station and tracked their path through the rocks, calling out minor adjustments. Reed corrected the heading each time with the ease of a man who had done something so many times it stopped feeling like effort. They were 2 hours into the Kessler drift when her console beeped. "Got a reading," she said. "Debris. No organic." Reed did not look up from the flight panel. "Run it again." She ran it again. The reading stayed. Large mass. Biological heat signature. Moving under its own power, parallel to the iron gate, about 60 meters off the port side. Too large to be anything Reed could name from memory, and his memory for catalogued space fauna was decent. "Pull it up on visual," he said. The external camera feed filled the small screen above Petra's station. For a moment there was nothing, just the slow drift of rock and dark. Then the camera adjusted, and they both saw it. It was wide. That was the first thing, wide and flat, like something that had been stretched until thin, 2 vast membrane wings that caught no light but made their own, pulsing in slow waves of blue along the trailing edges. The body at the center was compact, dense, darker than the wings. It moved with the kind of patience that big things have, nothing hurried, nothing wasted. Each sweep of those wings pushed it forward in a long, gliding arc. It was matching their speed exactly. Petra sat very still for a moment. Then she started running the databases. Known space fauna, nothing. Outer Reach biological catalog, nothing. Sakari Deep Field survey logs, nothing. The search came back empty every time. Whatever this was, nobody had written it down. "Unknown species," she said. "Noted," Reed said. "Log it and move on." "Reed, we're behind schedule, Petra." "I know, but look at it." He looked. He gave it 5 full seconds of his attention, which for Reed was significant. The creature, he did not know what else to call it, drifted alongside them in perfect parallel, its blue light pulsing in a slow rhythm that almost looked like breathing. It did not circle. It did not approach. It simply kept pace. Reed reached for the throttle and pushed the iron gate to a faster burn. The ship surged forward. Rocks blurred past on either side. He held the speed for 30 seconds, then checked the camera. The creature was still there, same distance, same position, 60 meters off the port side, gliding without apparent effort, its light still pulsing that same slow blue. He cut speed back to standard. The creature matched it. He adjusted heading by 15 degrees to port. The creature adjusted with him. "HM," Reed said. Petra had stopped pretending to look at the navigation screen. She was watching the camera feed openly now. "It's been tracking us since before I spotted the reading," she said. "Look at the approach angle. It was already positioned off our port side before my sensors flagged it. It found us first. Or it found our engine's signature, heat trailing. Space fauna does that sometimes." "Does space fauna adjust its heading in real time to match a course correction?" Reed had no answer for that. He sat back and looked at the creature for another few seconds. It looked back, or at least, whatever it had instead of eyes was pointed in their direction. "Log it," he said again. "Full sensor reading, visual capture, timestamp, coordinates. Send it to the Sakari relay when we are clear of the drift. Then get back on navigation." "And the creature?" "Not our problem." Petra turned back to her console. She opened the ship's log file and started typing. She entered the timestamp. She entered the coordinates. She entered all the sensor data. Then she paused at the field that asked for a species designation and typed, "Unknown." Outside, the creature continued to match their course through the Kessler drift, patient and silent and luminous in the dark, as if it had all the time in the universe. It did not fall behind. Not once. By the time the iron gate cleared the last edge of the debris field and open space spread out ahead of them, the creature was still there, 60 meters off the port side, pulsing its slow blue light, going exactly where they were going. Reed checked the rear sensor one more time before he went to eat. The reading was still there. He closed the screen and went to eat anyway. 12 hours after leaving the Kessler drift, the creature was still there. Petra had stopped sleeping properly. She kept pulling up the camera feed to check, not because she was worried it would attack, but because some part of her brain refused to believe something that large was simply choosing to follow a beat-up cargo ship through deep space. Every time she checked, there it was, 60 meters off the port side, pulsing its blue light, moving with the ship like a shadow that had decided it preferred this particular piece of darkness. She started a private log file on her personal console. Not the ship's official log, Reed would see that, her own file. She began cataloging the creature's light patterns because there was nothing else useful she could do, and watching without recording felt like a waste. Blues were most common, occasionally a thin wash of green along the wing edges. Once, only once, when the ship had made an unplanned course adjustment to avoid a stray rock, a rapid bright pulse that almost looked like alarm. She did not tell Reed about the private log. She also, quietly, started calling the creature her. She could not explain why. It simply felt accurate in the way that some things feel accurate before you can justify them. Around hour 14, Reed finally filed a query with the nearest Sekari relay station, a routine stop on the trade corridor, staffed by a Sekari operator named Drav, who had worked the relay for long enough that nothing surprised him. Reed read out the creature's physical description and sensor data and asked if there was a biological advisory on file. Drav's response came back within the hour. The creature, he said, was almost certainly a drift wanderer, a class of mindless space fauna found occasionally near debris fields. They trailed engine heat for warmth. They were harmless. They expired within a few cycles once they lost the heat source. Reed should not worry. Mindless, Petra said, after Reed read the response aloud. His word, not mine. It adjusted its heading in real time when we course-corrected. Twice. It also positioned itself on our port side specifically, where our hull shielding is thickest, right after we hit that microparticle scatter in the drift. She pulled up her private log on her console screen so Reed could not see it from his seat. Drift wanderers follow heat trails in a straight line. They don't navigate around debris. They don't position themselves relative to hull vulnerability points. You've been watching very carefully, Reed said. Someone should. He let it go. Reed was good at letting things go that he did not have an answer for. 3 more hours passed. Petra kept watching, and then she saw it, the thing that made her sit forward in her seat and stay there. The creature's wing beats were changing. They had been smooth since the beginning, long, unhurried sweeps, each one carrying her forward without visible effort, but now there was a hesitation in the left wing, a half beat, slightly short. She was compensating with the right wing, which meant she was working harder on one side to maintain the same speed. The blue light along her trailing edges had also dimmed slightly, not much, but Petra had been watching for long enough that she noticed. She pulled up the distance tracker. In the last 6 hours, the creature had dropped from 60 meters off the port side to nearly 90. She was falling behind in small increments, fighting it, closing the gap again, falling back again. She's struggling, Petra said. What? The creature, her wing beats are off. She's losing ground and making it back up, but she's burning a lot to do it. Petra turned in her seat. Reed, she has been following us for over 900 miles of open space. She is not mindless, and she is exhausting herself. Reed was quiet for a moment. He looked at the camera feed. The creature was visible in the frame, her light a little dimmer than before, her trajectory just slightly uneven. What do you want me to do about it? He said. His voice was flat, not unkind. I don't know, Petra said, which was honest. Another silence. Reed looked at the camera for a long time. The creature swept her wings again, the left one catching, stuttering, the right one overcorrecting. She was still keeping pace. She was keeping pace through the sheer fact of refusing to stop. Reed reached forward. He did not say anything. He did not explain. He simply pushed the throttle down to half thrust. The iron gate slowed, not dramatically, not enough to make the ship difficult to handle, but enough. The engine noise dropped. The whole ship settled into a quieter, slower rhythm. Petra watched the camera. For the first minute, nothing changed. Then the creature's wing beats began to even out. The hesitation in the left wing smoothed away. The light along her trailing edges brightened slowly back toward what it had been in the drift. She closed the distance without effort now 80 meters, 70, 60, back where she had started. "You slowed down," Petra said. "Fuel efficiency," Reed said. "Long haul." Petra looked at him. He was studying the navigation panel with great concentration, as if it were the most interesting navigation panel he had ever seen. "Right," she said. "Fuel efficiency." She turned back to her console and made a note in her private log. Then, after a moment, she made another note shorter, just 4 words. She wrote, "He slowed down first." Harvan Station appeared on the navigation screen as a small white dot that slowly grew into a shape. A boxy, unglamorous waypoint built by the Sekari Trade Authority 30 years ago and repaired piece by piece ever since. It was not a beautiful station. It smelled like recycled air and cold metal, and the particular staleness that settles into places where many different species pass through and none of them stay. But it had fuel, and it had a cargo processing bay, and right now those were the only 2 things on Reed's list. Petra ran the docking approach calculation, standard stuff. She had done it at Harvan a dozen times. The station's dockmaster hailed them before they even reached the outer marker. "Iron Gate, this is Harvan Station Authority. We are reading a large unregistered biological mass trailing your vessel at approximately 60 meters. Please confirm." Reed clicked the comm. "Confirmed. Unregistered life form. No hostile behavior. It has been following us since the Kessler drift." A pause, a longer pause than normal. "Iron Gate, the unregistered organism, is not cleared for station proximity. You are required to disperse it before completing your docking approach." Dockmaster Orvin Galt speaking. Reed already did not like Orvin Galt. "How do you suggest I do that?" he said. "Standard deterrent pulse, electromagnetic burst, low frequency. It will drive the organism away from the station perimeter." "Will it hurt her?" Another pause. When Galt came back, his voice had the careful tone of someone trying not to say something unkind directly. "Captain, the organism is unregistered fauna. Its comfort is not a docking requirement." Reed thought about this for exactly as long as it took him to decide that Orvin Galt was the kind of official who had never once asked himself whether a rule was fair before applying it. "I'll dock without the pulse," Reed said. "She'll follow the ship into the perimeter, but she won't approach the station structure. She has stayed at 60 meters this entire time." "That is not within." "I will take personal responsibility. Log it under my license number." He read the number out without being asked. "We need fuel and cargo processing. We'll be 6 hours." Galt sputtered. Reed closed the channel. He docked the iron gate without firing the deterrent pulse. Galt was not done. By the time Reed stepped off the ship and onto the station dock, there were 2 security officers waiting with the kind of posture that meant they had been told to look serious, but not told what to do. Galt himself appeared 10 minutes later, a tall Sekari with pale, overlapping facial scales and the tight expression of someone who had a procedure for every situation and was currently in a situation with no procedure. He informed Reed that Station Authority had the right to fire the deterrent pulse unilaterally, that the creature was a navigational hazard, that unregistered organisms within the station perimeter created liability, that Reed did not have the authority to override a dockmaster's safety decision. Reed listened to all of this with his arms crossed and his face doing nothing in particular. Then he said, "If you fire anything at that animal, I will file a galactic commerce obstruction complaint this afternoon. I will also request a full safety inspection of your docking clamps, which I noticed on approach have 3 amber warning indicators that should be read. I'll have an opinion on that in writing by end of day. And then I will sit in whatever counts as your magistrate's office until someone above your pay grade explains to me on record why an unregistered creature that has harmed nobody needs to be hurt just because it exists near your station." Galt stared at him. "I will be here 6 hours," Reed said. "Then I'll be gone and so will she." He walked past Galt toward the fuel office. Back on the iron gate, Petra stayed aboard. She did not feel like dealing with the station. Instead, she turned all her attention to the external cameras and the creature. Solar, she had started calling her in her head, just a name for convenience, something to write in the log that felt less cold than unknown fauna. She had been working on communication for 2 days with small results. Now she tried something different. She pulled up the control panel for the ship's exterior running lights, the ones along the port side, closest to where Solar always held position, and she began switching them in patterns. Simple ones, short, long, short, then short, short, long, then a copy of the most common pulse sequence she had catalogued from Solar's own light. For a while, nothing changed. Solar glided at her usual distance, her own light doing what it always did. Then she pulsed back, the exact same sequence Petra had sent. Petra sat very still, then she sent a different sequence. Longer, 3 parts. Solar held for 5 seconds, then she pulsed back the first 2 parts, paused, then added a 4th part that Petra had not sent. She was not copying, she was responding. Petra had her hands pressed flat on the console because they had started shaking, and she did not want to accidentally send something she did not mean. She was documenting everything, every exchange, every timing, every variation. Her private log was growing fast. After about an hour, Solar did something she had not done before. She moved not toward the ship, not back, but in a wide circle. A slow, deliberate orbit around the entire iron gate, taking several minutes to complete, smooth and calm. Then she returned to her spot, 60 meters off the port side, and pulsed once, a single, long blue. When Reed came back from the fuel office, Petra played him the recording without comment. He watched it twice. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he went to his bunk, and before he closed the door, he stopped at the ship's terminal in the corridor and opened the official log file, the one Petra could see. He found the entry for the creature, the one that said unknown fauna, Kessler drift. He changed it to one word: Solar. Then he went to sleep. The cargo delivery was now officially late. The client had sent 2 messages, and Reed had answered both with the same calm, brief text: delayed, amended arrival forthcoming, penalty accepted. He did not explain why. He never explained penalties to clients, because in his experience explaining things only made people angrier, and anger made them ask follow-up questions, and follow-up questions took time he did not have. 2 more days had passed since Harvan station. The iron gate moved through a quiet stretch of the outer reach where traffic was thin and the stars were dense, and the only sound aboard was the engine's low hum and Petra's occasional murmur as she worked. Solar was still there, 60 meters off the port side. Every morning, or what counted as morning on a ship that ran on clock time, Petra checked, and every time Solar was there, her light going through its slow rhythms, her wingspan making its long, unhurried sweeps. She had begun to feel less like a mystery and more like a fact of life, the kind of thing that simply was. Petra's communication log had grown to 43 distinct patterns she could recognize on sight. She had started responding to Solar in kind, not translating, not understanding, but speaking in the only shared language they had so far, which was light and timing and the willingness to listen. Solar's responses had started to vary in ways that suggested she was not just repeating but building. She would take what Petra sent, strip it apart, rebuild it with changes, like someone correcting a pronunciation. What surprised Petra more was that Solar had started responding differently to Reed's patterns than to hers. Reed had taken to sitting in the cockpit on his off hours. She had caught him once, very late, running the port running lights through sequences from her catalogue. He had said nothing when she walked in, and she had said nothing back, and they had not discussed it since. but she watched from the doorway long enough to see Solar pulse back a sequence that was twice as long as anything Reed had sent, and Reed leaned forward slightly, the way he did when something had his full attention. She left him alone with it. On the 48th hour after Harvan station, Solar showed them the injury. It must have been there for a while, probably since the Kessler drift, where microdebris and frozen shards of old satellite bodies could catch even a careful traveler. A long tear ran along the trailing edge of her left wing membrane, almost a quarter of the total length. The membrane was thin, you could almost see light through the undamaged sections, and where the tear was, it had pulled the surrounding material out of shape, puckering and stretching it. Her flight compensation had become more pronounced. She was doing extra work with every sweep. Neither Reed nor Petra mentioned it first. They both saw it on the camera at roughly the same time and sat with it for a few minutes in the particular silence of two people who know something is wrong and are each waiting for the other to be the one who says it out loud. Reed broke first. "Can we do anything?" he said. His voice was careful, flat. "She would have to be inside the ship," Petra said. "Silence." "The cargo hold," Petra continued. "I've been thinking about it since this morning. We could vent the hold to near vacuum, drop temperature. I don't know enough about her biology to know what her environment actually is, but based on her behavior she seems comfortable in open space, which means cold and low pressure at minimum. The hold is big enough she'd fill most of it, but she'd fit." She paused. "I don't know if she'd come in. I don't know if the pressure change would hurt her." "I don't know almost anything, Reed. I'm just telling you it's technically possible." Reed stared at the camera feed. Solar swept her wings. The left one caught on the upswing just slightly. She corrected without pause, automatic as breathing, but it was there. He pushed his chair back and stood up. "I'll be in the cargo hold," he said. Petra watched on the interior camera as he went through the corridor, down the short ladder and into the hold. He moved between the cargo crates with the ease of long familiarity, checking nothing, touching nothing, just moving through to the far side where the freight doors were, the large ones on the belly of the ship, used for oversized loading in low-atmosphere docking situations. Not the airlock, the actual freight doors. He opened the environmental control panel and began venting the hold's air to near vacuum. Slow, not an emergency dump, just a gradual reduction. Then he dropped the temperature to what he figured was somewhere in the range of deep space cold, as much as the ship's systems allowed. Then he moved to the freight door controls and paused. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the control. Petra had her eyes on the external camera. Solar was still at her usual position, her light doing its slow rhythms. She had not reacted to anything. Reed pressed the control. The freight doors opened two large panels on the belly of the ship, sliding back to reveal the dark outside. The hold flooded with black and stars. He turned and walked to the far interior wall of the hold and sat down on a crate with his back against it. He reached over and hit every light switch in the hold until the space was lit as brightly as it could be. Then he sat there. Nothing happened for a long time. Petra watched both cameras, the interior one with Reed, sitting still, arms resting on his knees, and the exterior one with Solar. For nearly 2 hours, Solar continued her usual pattern. No reaction, no change. Then her light shifted. The slow, regular pulse quickened slightly. She angled toward the ship, a gradual drift, not fast, not committed. A question rather than a decision. Petra said nothing. She barely breathed. Solar moved closer. 50 meters, 40. She was directly below the iron gate now, looking up through the open freight doors at the lit cargo hold and the man sitting inside it. Her light went very still, one long, held pulse of blue. And she hovered there at the threshold, not going in, not going away. Waiting, the same as Reed. She came in slowly. One membrane wing tipped first, testing the edge of the doorway, feeling the temperature difference, the pressure change, whatever senses she used to read a space before she trusted it. Then the rest followed in a long, careful fold. She drew her wings inward as she entered, pulling them close to her body, adjusting her shape to fit the available space the way water finds its level. The hold was large by any reasonable standard. She nearly filled it anyway. The cargo crates disappeared under the shadow of her wingspan. Her body settled near the center of the hold, her membranes folding flat against the floor, spreading out like a blanket. Her bioluminescence filled the space with shifting light blues and pale golds washing across the ceiling, the walls, the stacked containers. It was like being inside something alive. Reed did not move. He stayed on his crate at the far wall, arms resting on his knees, watching. He did not reach for anything. He did not speak. He breathed slowly and kept his body as still as a man his size could reasonably manage. Sola looked at him, whatever looked two areas of denser tissue near the front of her body, smooth and dark, which might have been eyes or something that served the same purpose. She looked at him for a very long time. Her light pulsed once, slowly, blue. Then she looked away, toward the rest of the hold, and seemed to accept it. She settled. It happened gradually, her membranes relaxing from their compressed travel fold into a wider, looser spread. The tension along the edges eased. The tear on her left wing became easier to see up close. It was longer than it had appeared on the camera, running nearly a third of the trailing edge, the membrane puckered and slightly darker where it had pulled apart. But it was already different from an open wound. The edges had begun to knit, slowly, imperfectly, but clearly intentionally. Her body was handling it. What she needed, it seemed, was to stop moving. After an hour, her light patterns slowed to something deep and rhythmic. Petra, watching from the bridge, called it sleep. She could not be certain, but it had the quality of sleep, reduced, inward, unhurried. The gold faded mostly out, and the blue became very soft. The whole hold breathed with it. Reed eventually stood up and climbed back to the bridge. He moved quietly, which was not usual for him. He was not a quiet-moving man, as a general rule. Petra had her private log open on one screen and the interior camera on another. She did not turn around when he came in. "She's resting," Petra said. "I know. The membrane is already closing, some kind of biological repair. It's slow, but it's working." He sat in his chair and looked at the camera feed for a while without speaking. Then he said, "I don't know what she wants." "You said that before, at the beginning." "I know, I still don't." Petra turned in her seat to face him. "Reed, she has been following this ship for 4 days, through a debris field, past a waypoint station where she got an electromagnetic weapon pointed at her, for over 900 miles of open space, with a wing injury." She let that sit for a moment. "She doesn't want something from us. I think she just wants to be near us." He didn't answer. He looked at the camera. "Maybe that's the hardest thing for you to accept," Petra said, "that she isn't after cargo or heat or some resource. She just saw us slow down for her, and nobody had ever done that before, and she didn't want to lose whatever that was." Reed said nothing, which for Reed meant she was probably right. The message from Director Fenner, Allrose, came in at the start of the next watch cycle. It was formal in tone and short on warmth. Allrose identified herself as Senior Director of the Outer Reach Biological Survey Division. She indicated that Dockmaster Galt had filed a detailed report on the Iron Gate's encounter with an unregistered life form. The division was extremely interested. They were redirecting a survey vessel to intercept the Iron Gate's current course. They required Reed to hold position and cooperate with specimen collection. She used the phrase specimen collection 3 times in a message that was fewer than 200 words. She did not ask how the creature was doing. She did not ask if the creature was injured. She did not ask what the creature had been doing for 4 days or what she might have been trying to communicate. She asked for coordinates, current status of the organism, and Reed's confirmation of cooperation. Reed read the message twice. Then he set it aside and went to the cargo hold. Sola was still resting. Her light had come up a little since the deepest part of her sleep, still slow, but warmer, the gold beginning to come back into the edges of her wings. The tear on the left membrane had narrowed visibly in the hours she had been still. He stood in the doorway of the hold for a long time and looked at her. She opened her, whatever they were, the dark areas near the front of her body. She looked at him. Her light pulsed once, a single long blue. A pause. Then again, the same. He moved into the hold slowly and crossed to where her nearest wing edge rested against the floor. He crouched down. He pressed one hand flat against the surface of the membrane, gently, the way you touch something you don't fully understand but are choosing to trust anyway. Her light did not change. She did not pull away. She pulsed once more, slow, blue, unchanged. He stayed there for a while. Then he stood up and went back to the bridge and opened a channel to Director Allrose. He thought about what he was going to say all the way up the corridor. By the time he sat down, he had it. Reed told Director Allrose that the creature was not available. He said it simply, the way you say something when you have already finished arguing with yourself about it and arrived somewhere solid. He told her that a being had entered his cargo hold voluntarily, had caused no harm, had displayed clear behavioral complexity, and had done so after following his vessel for the better part of a week, under conditions that had cost her significantly. He said he was invoking captain's authority over voluntary passengers aboard his vessel. He said the word sentient deliberately, knowing it was a gray area in galactic maritime law, knowing it would take time to challenge, and knowing that time was all he needed. Allrose pushed back. She cited biological hazard statutes. She mentioned his freight license. She told him that an unregistered organism inside a trade vessel was a regulatory violation that could suspend his operating clearance. Reed said, "Then suspend it. I'll be at dock in 4 days. You can argue with me in person." He closed the channel. Petra looked at him from across the bridge. "They'll come anyway," she said. "Eventually, but not before she's ready to leave." They did not discuss how they knew that. They both seemed to understand, without being able to explain it, that Solar would decide when Solar was done. The ship was not a cage. The freight doors were still operable from inside the hold. Reed had not locked anything. He had simply opened a door and waited, and she had come in, and that was the shape of it. 18 hours passed. Allrose sent 2 more messages. Reed answered both with the same short reply. Matter under captain's review, further communication at dock. Station authority at Harvan filed a formal complaint. Someone who was probably a lawyer sent a document with a lot of Sekari legal formatting that Reed put in the trash folder without reading. In the cargo hold, Solar rested and healed. Petra spent most of those 18 hours on the interior camera and in quiet communication through the lights in the hold. She had rigged a panel near the hold entrance so she could send and receive patterns without going through the ship's main systems. Her log had passed 60 distinct patterns now. She was beginning to find sequences that repeated in specific situations. Solar pulsed one particular pattern every time Reed entered the hold, a different one when Petra entered. They were not the same. The one for Reed was longer. She wrote that down and said nothing about it to anyone. On the 18th hour, something changed. Petra noticed it first on the camera. Solar's membranes had been resting flat for most of her time in the hold, but now they were moving, not the slow, restless shift of adjustment, but purposeful, the way you stretch before you stand. She folded them, extended them, folded again, testing. Her light patterns quickened to something that Petra had catalogued early on as anticipation, the same pattern she displayed in the drift when the iron gate had first made a course correction that concerned her. "Reed," Petra said over the intercom. He was already coming down the corridor. He stood in the hold doorway. Solar looked at him, those dark, smooth areas of her body oriented toward him fully. Her light was bright now, brighter than it had been since before the injury, back to what it had been in the Kessler drift when they had first seen her on the cameras. The tear on her left membrane had closed to less than half its original length. She would carry a mark there, probably always, but the wing was whole enough to work. She held the look for a long moment. Her light went through every color she had ever shown, the blues and golds, and the rare pale green that Petra had only documented twice, in one long, slow wave from her body outward to the tips of her wings. Then Reed stepped aside from the doorway. He walked across the hold to the freight door controls and opened them. The same way he had before, the panels sliding back, the dark outside rushing in, the stars filling the opening. He walked back to his crate and sat down. Solar looked at the open doors. She looked at Reed. She looked at the doors again. Then she unfolded slowly and moved toward the opening. At the threshold she paused, one wingtip over the edge, into open space, the rest of her still inside the hold. She pulsed, long and blue and held. Reed put his hand up, not a wave, just a hand raised, open toward her. She pulsed once more, then she went. She did not vanish. She circled the iron gate, slowly, the same complete orbit she had done at Harvan station, taking her time, her light washing over the ship's hull. Then she climbed away from the ship's plane, up and out, accelerating with those long, unhurried wing beats that had carried her 900 miles through open space. Within 30 minutes, she was a point of light. Within 2 hours, she was gone. The cargo hold was just a hold again, cold and empty and smelling of metal. Reed closed the freight doors and pressurized the hold and stood in the corridor outside it for a while. Then he went to the bridge. Petra did not ask if he was okay. She could see that he was, and also that he wasn't, and that both of those things were fine. "I'll file my paper," she said. "The communication log, the behavioral catalog, everything." "Good." They'll argue about whether she was truly sapient. The Sekari researchers mostly. It'll go on for years. "Let them argue," he settled into his chair. "We know what we saw." She submitted her paper 3 weeks later. The xenological community did, as predicted, argue about it for years. But the catalog itself was hard to dismiss. 43 repeating light patterns documented with timestamps showing consistent change in response to external stimuli. The paper circulated far past the scientific community and into places where people talked about what it meant that a human freighter captain had slowed his ship down for something he didn't know and couldn't name. The Sekari had a word for humans, an old one. It translated roughly as the ones who stop for things. They had always meant it as an insult, an observation that humans wasted time on what did not concern them, on creatures beneath notice, on costs that made no logical sense. After Petra's paper, the word started to change. Not everywhere, not quickly, but in the places where people paid attention to such things, it began to carry something different, not mockery, something closer to the feeling you get when you see someone do something difficult simply because it was right. And somewhere out past the Kessler drift, in the deep black where particle currents run slow and the stars are very far apart, something vast and luminous moved through the dark. She rode the thermals with her wings fully spread. The tear on her left membrane had become a pale, smooth line, visible if you knew where to look, invisible if you didn't. She did not look back. But when the particle currents shifted, she chose the direction that a certain set of stars lay in. She did not have a word for why. She did not need one.